So David Davis has quit. But what does that mean for Brexit? Does it mean we're going to get another election? Does it mean Theresa May resigns? Does it mean the whole cabinet breaks apart and the whole parliament breaks apart? Well, in this video, we're going to find out. But first, let's take a look back at David Davis's career as Brexit Secretary. So, during the referendum campaign, David Davis was on the Leave side. He was the one campaigning to leave the EU at all costs. On the Remain side were people campaigning to remain in the EU at all costs. But the media invented these terms, hard Brexit and soft Brexit, which came down to the detail of the whatever Brexit we would get. So for example, hard Brexit was leaving the customs union and the single market. Soft Brexit was remaining in one of those two for whatever reason. But then the referendum happened. And we ended up with 52% of people voting Leave and 48% of people voting Remain. Now, I'll show you what that looks like on an apple. You can see that it's very, very confusing as to what actually that meant for Brexit. But nevertheless, David Cameron resigned, Theresa May was appointed Prime Minister, and David Davis was appointed Negotiating Minister. Now, Theresa May decided to have an election that year, because her polls were doing well, and she felt that she needed a mandate to go ahead with the negotiations. But of course she didn't actually campaign in the election, she didn't go ahead with any kind of debates, and she didn't really she met people once, but it didn't go too successfully, and it wasn't a great campaign for her. Meanwhile, Jeremy Corbyn had a great campaign. He did well in the TV debates, and he almost won the election, except he didn't because he didn't have enough clout to, well, overcome the Conservatives for whatever reason. Whatever way you interpret it, we ended up with a hung parliament, which was a worse situation for Brexit negotiations than we had to begin with. It meant that there were more Remainers in Parliament, particularly on the Labour side, but also the SNP, the Lib Dems, the Greens, and Plaid Cymru. Also meant Theresa May had to side with the DUP in order to get majority in Parliament, which meant that her negotiating was always sided on that half of politics in Northern Ireland. Nevertheless, it meant that negotiating with the EU could begin. So we negotiated things like making sure that EU citizens were safe within the EU and that their rights were protected. We had an EU withdrawal bill which would basically copy and paste all EU law into our UK law. And we had other things to sort out as well, such as the Irish border. That's still not sorted out yet, by the way. But David Davis was accused by the EU of simply just staying in the negotiations, starting them, ending them, but not being there for the entirety of the negotiation, just leaving halfway for his civil servants to do the rest. As expected, the EU weren't very friendly on this, particularly when it came down to the Irish border. They didn't want to start the troubles again, but at the same time they felt like a free border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland would mean that Northern Ireland would have to be in the single market and customs union and free trade area. Now obviously the DUP wasn't happy with this because it meant that their part of the UK wasn't going to get the same kind of Brexit that the rest of the UK got. So it wasn't fair on Northern Ireland to be in the free movement area, in the single market and in the customs union if the rest of the UK simply isn't. So the EU always thought with an economic mind as opposed to a political mind. No. We think of your economy. You want to be in the single market, free tariffs for you, better for you, you get better economy, yeah? But of course, the UK wasn't happy with it, particularly David Davis. He accused the EU of putting prosperity before politics, and that came to a sticking point in negotiations. So then it came round to a parliamentary committee on impact assessments relating to the economy post-Brexit. He was accused of altering impact assessments to make it seem like the economy would be better off post-Brexit than it would be staying in the EU. So at Chequers, Cabinet agreed to negotiate a free trade area. Now, Davis believed that that meant that we wouldn't eventually get out the customs union and single market as he believed that we should. So, he resigned. certainly weakens Theresa May's position. It means that other ministers can resign and a vote of no confidence can go against her in Parliament from their own Tory backbenchers. But here's the other thing. Those Brexiteers don't want to thwart Brexit. They don't want a general election mid-negotiations, because at the end of the day we've only got a 2-year window to get these negotiations finished. And also, we don't want to hand the Labour Party, who seem very confused on what their stance is on Brexit, the negotiations. Because, let's face it, they voted against the government most of the time in Parliament. But God only knows what that means for Brexit. And that's why I think if we had another general election, we'd end up with a hung Parliament anyway, because there is no Brexit party with enough majority to gain power in Parliament. UKIP is basically dead, the Tories are divided, and Labour has been voting against the government most of the time. So what I think will happen is the negotiations will go on regardless. David Davis has been replaced, and we'll end up with some kind of deal or whatever it is. At the end of those negotiations, though, should be a referendum. Now, I know the Lib Dems vowed for this, but Labour and the Conservatives are against this. They're not going to offer it on any terms. So it won't happen either. But there should be a referendum. There should be some kind of census that says we're happy with the deal or we're not happy with the deal. Because at the end of the day, most of Parliament doesn't seem to know what the British public want. It's up to Parliament to do a better job at listening to the British public. But do you agree with me? Join in the debate below and subscribe.